everybody. Welcome to another episode of What's Up Watchtower. And again, joining us today is Floyd.
Yay!
Hi everyone.
By popular demand,
Back by
Floyd
popular
is
demand.
back.
I'm flattered. I am absolutely flattered.
So we need to kind of pick up where we left off with his
Well,
story.
first of all, we want to say thank you, Floyd, for working on our website, www.whatsupwatchtower.com. And why don't you tell us a little bit about what you've been doing with our website?
Well, what I've been doing with the website has been, obviously the most important thing would be their disassociation letter, which is printed out on the front, but you can also download it as a PDF. Right under that is the YouTube equivalent of their disassociation letter. But there's also, as you go through the site, you're going to see links to other resources. And I think one of the most important things would be the contact. Now you can directly contact What's Up Watchtower, or you can do info@whatsupwatchtower.com. And there's a newsletter that hopefully we can get that out at least once per month. That will be a resource of, different things going on within what these guys are doing, and, other things that are found out. So look for the newsletter link. It's at the bottom of the page on the right-hand side. So.
I just found out today that we have a newsletter.
Yeah.
That's the thing, is the site is still in the beginning. It's very beginning of its lifespan. So it's going to be constantly growing and changing as time goes on. And as you can tell, Floyd's passionate about it. So we're going to be seeing new stuff a lot.
And thank you. There are some people who have contacted us through that site. We haven't been able to get back to you yet. It's been a really busy week, but we are looking for people to contribute articles. So, if you're interested in doing that, please reach out to us. Don't be alarmed if you don't hear from us for a few days. We're trying to get to everybody. But definitely contact us about that if you're interested in it.
And there's also other ways of contacting What's Up Watchtower through Twitter. We're going to be adding the Facebook contact to it as well, and any other social media that may come along. We will be adding that to the site as well.
Yep.
Wow, I feel so professional.
Yeah, it's professional.
Who knew it was going to grow to this?
Hey.
We certainly didn't.
Yeah,
We just wanted to tell our story and offer support to those people who have been through similar things as we have. And so now, now it's growing, and you can't stop us now. We're on to you.
Mm-hmm. That's it.
So we just wanted to pick up from where we left off in our last conversation. And we were at the point where you two were no longer allowed to associate with each other. And what happened? And all you said that you went through just a series of Bible studies with various elders during that time, and
Not by choice, by the way.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Watching that back, that you had to study the Revelation book just blows my mind that they're making a 14-year-old study that book.
It was really difficult because, quite honestly, I remember specifically they were trying to get me to remember a specific line of events, and I just couldn't get it right, and I must have gone over it week after week after week, and somehow it just all I couldn't grasp it. Couldn't grasp it.
I'd rather take a beating any day.
Oh, I would have been a lot simpler than what I went through. So.
So take us through what happened after that, because I did mention in the last video that you moved out of your house when you were 15. So why don't you take us through what happened during that time?
Okay, so as a few months later, we had moved from one location to another. There were some personal circumstances that ended up happening, my father ended up out of the picture temporarily, so I was just living with essentially my step family. And as that happened, the actual organization, or the congregation specifically, things got a little bit, if you can believe this, it got harder for me. I was starting to hear more and more about me being a bad influence, and it was almost like a weekly thing going on. It was a barrage, of it, and it all ended up going completely south over the weirdest thing. It was something had happened where I was being disciplined for something else. And I felt in my, 15-year-old mind now that I was being unfairly singled out. And much to, I don't want to paint, my stepmother out to be a devil, but she was trying to raise, 2 15-year-old boys and deal with all of the things that she had to deal with. And I'm sure that I wasn't the easiest to raise at this time, especially because I was so unhappy. I hated going to the meetings. It really started to get to me, and I'm sure that I started to rebel against all of it. And it finally came to a head where I was pretty much told that I had a choice. I either had to abide by what the rules of the house were, which in my mind meant the rules of the organization because it was encroaching in on the discipline of the house, or I could live with a brother. And when this happened, it's kind of a heavy thing for a 15-year-old kid.
Yeah. With your biological brother.
Yeah. It was my biological brother. It was my older brother.
Yeah.
He was in his later 20s. I had to make a pretty quick decision because I knew I was unhappy. I knew that if I stayed in the house, this would all just keep getting worse. And so I had made the decision that I was going to live with him, and so I called him, and he came and he picked me up.
Yeah. And I just want to interject, that's what was going on his side at that time, what was going on my side at that time, and I just was thinking of this as Floyd was talking, because we were really into skateboarding and music and stuff like that. And after I wasn't associating with Floyd any longer, I didn't really have any friends. That in the there was no one in the congregation who was into the things I was into. A lot of the people that were my age were just doing their own thing. So I didn't have any friends in the congregation. And so I started hanging out with a worldly kid that I was good friends with, that I went to school with, who lived in the neighborhood. And so my parents didn't mind that. So I was skateboarding and hanging out with this kid who was worldly, and I just put this together. I wasn't allowed to hang out with Floyd, who was going to the meetings and stuff, but I was allowed to hang out with a worldly kid that I used to go to high school with. And I was allowed to hang out with another worldly kid. The three of us were kind of friends, and skateboarding, and the one had a mini half pipe in his backyard, so we used to go skateboard over there. But I was allowed to have worldly friends to an extent, but not friends with anyone inside the congregation. I wasn't friends with Floyd. I didn't even know where Floyd was at this time. I was actually pretty oblivious to all the inner workings of what was happening. We weren't really in contact, but I didn't have witness friends at that time. I had worldly friends.
Wow.
So what I had found out later on through a conversation that I was having with actually my stepmom, is that she was chastised because she had let me go live with a worldly brother. And she was told by some elders of the congregation that she had made a grave mistake, that she should demand that I move back home. And she looked at it like, this is too much for me to handle. I have a lot of things that I'm dealing with. This is something off of my plate so I can deal with it. He's being taken care of. I don't know what you want. And so she came under scrutiny from the congregation. And I did not find this out until, quite honestly, only a few years ago.
Wow. And you had told us before that when you went to live with your brother, that it was such a quick decision that literally you just went with the clothes on your back.
Yeah, I had three pairs of clothes and my skateboard. Because
can't leave that.
I had because what had happened was I didn't know what to do, because I thought that I took a lot of things into account in my mind. Was I didn't want to switch schools because I liked the school that I was going to. I knew that I'd have to leave my neighborhood friends, but I knew that I was absolutely unhappy. So what I did was, I don't even know if it was a duffel bag. I think I grabbed like a plastic bag, threw whatever clothes in it, and I left.
And that's all you had for a year.
Absolutely, yeah.
That was
Yeah. It's interesting because this one picture that I had seen, I was skateboarding a lot, so people would take photos of me skating, and I had this one shirt that was this darker blue. Well, in November, it was a dark blue, but then I saw the same thing in May, and it was like almost white.
Wash the
color right out of it. I must have wore that thing like every other day. Yeah.
Wow.
But I didn't care. I didn't care.
So during that year that you were living with your brother, what did you notice about how you felt during that time? It wasn't really easy to live with a brother, especially my brother wasn't prepared to have a 15-year-old living with him. I mean, it was not an ideal situation.
No, not at all.
In any way.
They weren't expecting, it was my brother and his wife. They weren't expecting to have to raise me, and they weren't in a financial situation to do it, and it was just basically like a roof over my head. Mm-hmm. And
but you were pretty independent.
I was incredibly independent.
You found your way to school. Did you have to skateboard to school?
Yeah, I had to. I actually had to skateboard about 2.5 miles because my brother lived. It was a distance away from where I was living, so I wanted to go to that school so badly that I skated every morning to my bus stop, and it was
2.5 miles to your bus stop.
Yeah, it was pretty long, but I mean, to a skateboarder, I mean, there was as long as there was curbs and stuff.
You would do that any after school, skate 4 or 5 miles, it wouldn't matter.
Absolutely. So it didn't really bother me, mm-hmm. But what was difficult was my brother was going through his own, personal battles, and to have a 15-year-old kid there, and I'm sure I wasn't the cleanest of children. I was a 15-year-old boy. It had its share of challenges, but the way I looked at it was when I got to this, anybody would relate to this. When I got to Tuesday nights, instead of having to go to the book study, I went to skate night, which is skateboard night, and I went every single week.
Wow.
So.
And I was there too from time to time.
Yeah.
And I think what is funny about this story is that Floyd's life and my life are like in this little orbit around each other.
Yeah.
Even though we're not in contact with each other, we're at the same places, we know the same people, you know, we have, it's really pretty interesting if you break it down.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's just, even though Mike and I weren't talking to each other, it was shocking how many people we actually knew that knew one another, knew Mike. So I had always heard Mike updates throughout the years, you know.
Yeah, and I didn't know. I didn't know this stuff was happening. I didn't know you knew the same people as I did. We never talked about it. So it was funny to find out later.
Yeah.
You know?
In so many ways, you said that you had lived parallel lives, because as your music taste changed through the years, you both were listening to the same music and stuff that isn't mainstream at all.
Our evolution really parallels one another, and it's weird because we had no contact with each other.
None.
It just
happened
that way.
So
I mean, because there were times when we had bumped into each other briefly and had spoken. But it was very.
We ran into you one time at the mall.
Oh, exactly.
Well, that was when after we were married and stuff.
I mean, it just, I was working at a record store, and Mike had come in.
Oh.
And it was a really quick conversation. But even comparing notes then, you know, we were into very, what are you saying, like very underground music, and we were both into the same bands, and we had no contact with one another. It was just freaky like that.
I had forgotten about that. When you worked at the music store, because there was a time period in my life, just like in your life, where I was still living at home, spending every dime I made buying records, CDs, tapes, you know, music.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely.
And so I had forgotten about that. I used to go to the music store you worked at.
Yeah.
Did you find at any point, did you think about it consciously or maybe subconsciously? What was it like for you, though, to get away from the heavy indoctrination, the daily indoctrination during that year?
It was an absolute weight off of me. Like I said before, it wasn't the easiest of years. I had lost, you know, obviously I put it back on, but I had lost a lot of weight because my brother really didn't have the money to support me. So I was borrowing and stealing anything I could possibly get to keep, you know, alive, keep going. I mean, I really had to scale back because I didn't have a lot. But even with all of that, I was, for the first time in my life, I was happy. And so much so that the superlatives of my middle school, I was actually voted the friendliest person in my school. I was just a happy person. I was known as, I was very, very happy. I was a very happy person. And it was because I didn't have that hanging over my head. It was fantastic to actually make friends and not worry about, are they the right friend? Are they the wrong friend? I didn't have that anymore. And I was ecstatic over that.
Oh, that's great.
And on the flip side, I didn't have any friends. I had a couple of worldly friends that I hung out with, that skateboarded with, and that was it. I didn't hang out with anybody at the Kingdom Hall. I wasn't friends with anybody at the Kingdom Hall. Like, in a lot of ways, that was really, really, really exceptionally good, you know, that breakaway, man. But that is not, as a witness, you just, what do? You know? Stuck.
Yeah. So, there were circumstances a year later that you ended up moving back into your family home.
Yeah.
And so just take us through that, like what happened once you moved back in?
Well, what had happened was I had, you know, my father, it wasn't really a choice. I had to move back home. And
because you're still a minor, you're only 16.
I was not even. I was still 15. I was a couple of months away from being 16. I remember him meeting me at like Burger King, and he really kind of like put the hammer down. And I remember it specifically where he was saying, this is what you're moving back home, this is what you're going to do. And as he was listing his demands, he said that I was going to go back to the meeting. And I went, no. I stopped him right there. I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I don't care if I can't go back to living with my brother. I will find someplace else to live, because I knew that was the problem of my life. I had I had a year to think about this. I had a year of dealing with adversity, and I was happy. And this was obviously the problem. So I told him flat out, no, I'm not coming back home if that's one of the conditions of my return.
Wow.
And you don't say, the thing is you don't say no to my father. My father is a disciplinarian, very authoritative, incredibly intelligent man. And for me to stand up to him like that, that's how much conviction I had.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't going to happen.
So your dad made a deal with you.
Yes, my dad actually knew that he knew I was dead serious. So he said to me, well, since you're not going to go to the meetings, you have to get a job. You have to go to work. And I was like, okay, done. I don't care. Done anything. I would have done anything but to go back.
Wow.
A lot of it was like anybody else who's, dealt with it is just I didn't want to deal with the cold shoulders. I didn't want to deal with fakeness. I mean, you have to understand, I was afraid to go back home because to deal with my stepmother. I mean, I have not talked to her in this time period. So that was going to be really difficult. And so I didn't need anything else complicating my life. So when he said that you needed to get a job, I was totally fine with that.
One more reason to be out of the house.
Well, that was actually his reasoning for it was, well, I guess in his mind he thought, well, if you're working, then you have a reason that you're not attending meetings, which, hey, whatever floats your boat.
So your dad made a deal, you can work, and we can just say, oh, he's working. That's why he can't be at the meetings. And so you continued to live at home until what age?
I actually stayed at home until I was almost 21.
Okay.
So I lasted pretty, long, because most of my brothers moved out around 17 or 18. And so that was unprecedented.
How were you able to navigate that sort of lifestyle of living with heavily indoctrinated witnesses and still maintaining your individuality during that time?
Oh boy, that was difficult. Because at the time I started to get more into like the alternative music scene, like, Mike had said. And so I ended up wearing like a lot of black. Things haven't changed. Wearing like a lot of black and just starting to style my hair different. And that was difficult because as I was progressing with this, I started getting a little bit more pushback. And one time, Mike had mentioned in the last video that he used his car kind of as a locker to keep stuff out of the sight of his parents. Well, I made the mistake, and I know everyone watching this is just gonna go, oh, I can't believe you did this. I walked in because I was going through this, I was really into like gothic music at the time. So I walked in and I totally forgot that I had borrowed a girlfriend's, I believe it was a cross. It was a crucifix.
Jeez.
And I walked in the house and I completely forgot that I was wearing it. And my parents went, they just lost it. And that was a really big fight. And other things I had to keep, once again, had to keep secret. And so things were being, constantly, like, I put it under my bed or whatnot. But as I got older, my parents, they kind of backed off a little bit. But right when I thought that I was more in the clear, I came home.
You can't ever get complacent.
No, I screwed up. I came home and I found everything in the middle of my room on my bed. I mean, because I used to have posters on my wall.
Ray Barbie skateboarding
and,
posters.
it was just kind of like, well, at that point it wasn't even skateboarding, because I wasn't really skateboarding, because I was about 17, 18 years old. So some people will know the reference, other people won't, but like I had a ministry Psalm 69 poster on the wall, and I had a couple of Bauhaus posters, and they were torn off the wall. My Skinny Puppy poster was torn off the wall, and they went through my CDs. And it was like Misfits were in the middle of the, middle of the pile.
It's got a skull on the
Exactly. Front. Danzig, of course, and I mean, they lost it when they saw the Lucifuge. Oh my God, And so I was expected to get rid of all this stuff, which no way, I wasn't going to do it. I had quite the collection, and I started to, stand up for myself a little bit more. But I think the thing that really kind of the shockwaves that went through was I was reading a book that I had borrowed from a friend of a performance artist named Karen Finley, who, if you don't know who Karen Finley is, she's quite controversial. I mean, Congress has literally had meetings about this lady because of the National Endowment for Education, for the arts, the NEA, and I was reading her book, and it's pretty graphic. She can be vulgar in ways, and I don't know what I was thinking. Story of my life. I don't know what I was thinking, and I had left it in the living room, kind of underneath the sofa, and my stepmom found it, and she went crazy. She was like, "This is disgusting," and my only defense, I was like, "Oh, but that's not my book. I never even got a chance to read it. Is it bad? Oh God, thank God I didn't read it."
Mom, you saved me from making a big mistake.
That was basically because I knew what was in this book, and I was just like, "Oh, I'm sorry, but it's time to fib."
Well, it just goes back that I just want us to take one quick step back about what you were saying. We talked about this at lunch today. As a Jehovah's Witness in school, you're already on the fringe. You're already like, you don't fit in with the regular people. You don't associate with the jocks and the cheer. You don't fit in. And my friends in high school, just like your friends in high school, were the freaks, the weirdos, the punks, the gothic kids.
Yeah.
If there was a kid with a purple mohawk and wearing combat boots, yeah, it was probably my friend. Because that's where we fit in. We didn't fit. And by the way, that was a group of people who accepted you however you were. Whatever you believed, they were cool with it. Nobody was razzing you, giving you trouble. But that's why it kind of led me in that direction. It led you in that direction, it's like, where else do you go? You're already on the fringe. You're drawn to certain things, and next thing you know, you're just friends with all the punks and all that stuff, and that's how it works
Freaks
out.
and geeks.
Yeah, exactly. And then,
well, it's interesting though too, because most of the ex-witnesses in my age group that I know are possibly the coolest people I had ever met culturally. They really, there's 4 or 5 people that I know in this area here that are absolutely, they are the coolest people, the most far out, like Zoe here,
Yes.
Zoe, she's just,
She's making her appearance.
She's, exactly, and they're totally cool, and so, she's like, no.
So the next thing that we wanted to sort of talk about, we're trying to there's so many stories, so we're just trying to really focus. After you left home, then once you're an adult and moving on with your life, how long would you say, or when did you notice that you really were awake, that you no longer believed that it could possibly be true?
That's a great question. I would have to say it was my early 20s, because once I moved out of home and I was able to be in my own environment without any of that influence. Because the first time it was, I was just kind of trying to catch my breath. Once I was out of that, I guess that bubble that my parents had me in, and I was able to be an adult and be on my own and have my own experiences, I started to do research. I tell my kids this, is as soon as I left home, my act of rebellion was to actually go out and buy books, which is something that I don't think a lot of people realize, that Jehovah's Witness children, there was nothing but Watchtower Bible and Tract Society books in my house. That's how I learned how to read, was my book of Bible stories. And I remember being so incredibly bored, because if you have, bound awake volumes, that doesn't make for very enticing reading. And I was kind of a smart kid.
Yeah, plus you wanted nonfiction too. So.
Yeah, exactly. And it just, so my first act of rebellion really was to go out and start getting an education. And I dove into everything. I dove into history and, alternative religions. Quite honestly, and I'm sure a lot of people went through this, was I wanted to find out, like, all these scary pictures that I used to see in all of our literature. I wanted to know why it was so scary. So I learned about Satanism. I learned about witchcraft. I learned about, Santeria, voodoo. And I was so amazingly disappointed.
Yeah. It's like a real letdown, isn't it? To know it's nothing like the movies.
Oh, and the way it was, kind of illustrated to us is, it was scary. And when you look at it from, a research, and you're just kind of like, that's it? And so as I went through all of this, I took ideas, discarded other ones, and it was I was in my early 20s when I finally reached a conclusion that none of it just took to me. It just didn't take to me. And so it quite honestly, my waking up period probably took about 20 years.
Wow.
It took a good education of finding out about different belief systems, how they pertain to my life, do I believe, don't I believe, and then even going back and re-examining the witnesses and what we were taught there, and you sit there and you do a comparison and you just kind of reach your own conclusions. So yeah, it took quite a while, but I enjoyed it. It wasn't instantaneous. It was over a period of time as I evolved as a person.
So would you say that during that 20-year period that there was still times when you might have been afraid that, what if this is the truth, and what if Armageddon is really going to happen?
No.
No, you weren't afraid of that.
No, it just the thing that I had found out pretty quickly was that there were certain things that only Jehovah's Witnesses believed, and that they were very much in a vacuum of that belief system.
Right.
And so I discarded a lot of it, and I liked the journey. I remember going into, this sounds crazy to any normal person watching this, but I remember the first time I stepped foot in a Catholic church. And I remember feeling, wow, there was a time when I was not allowed to do this. And I had brought my daughter in because having, children, I did not want her to have the limitations that I had growing up. Mm-hmm. I wanted her to experience life. And that was the one thing, is I said, you can believe whatever you want to believe, don't believe what you want to believe. This is all up to you. Mm-hmm. And as kind of an act of rebellion, I remember taking her into a Catholic church, not for service, but just, going in. And I had not stepped foot in a Catholic church since I was really, really young.
To prove to yourself you wouldn't get struck down by God.
Yeah, and of course I just kind of, I looked at this and I just went, wow, like, what is there to be afraid of?
Yeah. So one of the other interesting things that you had said earlier was how you didn't feel in your experience that when you were talking to your parents that they could talk to you just like a real person. Why don't you explain that a little more?
Well, the one thing that I had noticed is that my parents, and this seems to be all Jehovah's Witnesses, and this is why I feel that many times the word cult is thrown around in conjunction with the organization, is because they don't speak about like current events or anything in a normal matter. Case in point, there's a lot of buzzwords that witnesses use that we even find ourselves slipping into. Like, I had just watched a video that you guys did last week where Mike corrected himself. Instead of using the word people, he said worldly people. And there's a lot of buzzwords that exist within the organization, such as the truth. Mm-hmm. Instead of saying, this is my religion, it's like the truth. Well, to an outsider, that makes no sense. They're like, what are you talking about? You need to be more specific. Mm-hmm. And I had noticed that any conversation I had with my parents always was framed from the perspective of their religion. And it was always framed by their biblical standpoint. And as ex-witnesses, it's very hard to speak to a current witness because you guys aren't coming from the same vantage point. Yeah. It's kind of like if you're going to have a debate about something, there has to be a common ground between both of you. Some kind of, okay, we agree on this. But if they're trying to make every single argument based off the Bible, and you're using something like, I don't know, like science or, you know, some kind of political bent, you're going to miss each other. And that happened all the time. And so it's really difficult to speak with anybody who's still indoctrinated, because you almost feel like you're speaking to a completely, like you're in another language.
Yeah, I had an experience a couple of years ago talking with my parents, and they were talking, did you hear about this earthquake that happened here and this one that happened there? And I was like, yep, it sounds like the plates are moving. Earth's crust is moving, as it's always done.
I had a conversation with a family member where they had brought up the evolution book, the blue one, and that, I guess, is considered amongst Jehovah's Witnesses as a heavy book. You know, you have to understand that. You really have to be smart. And the family member said to me, like, oh, you should read that because, you know, you're pretty smart, Floyd. And what had happened was, as I read their book. I read the book. And I had a lot of questions because the main thing, and a lot of, you know, other apostate channels have brought this up, is their facts were very cherry-picked. And I couldn't cross-reference anything. Because that was the first thing I had ever learned, was cross-reference your material, or else, you know, in this day and age, you know, if I don't quote my sources, then what I'm saying is just hogwash. So as I was discussing this with the family member, I came upon a realization and just kind of stopped the conversation and said, you know, you're giving me a book that has now been downsized to a pamphlet. You know, you're literally talking about natural selection. I like how you call it Darwinism, natural selection. You've now reduced it to a pamphlet. And I had said to him, you hand me a pamphlet to make an argument. But in order for me to make my argument, I would have to give you books that would end up under your chin, stacked high. And the problem is I read your book, you would never read mine.
And the thing is, those aren't apostate books, they're science books.
Right.
But they refuse to accept what is written, what is said.
Correct.
By multiple other sources.
Yeah, they refuse to go and do research outside of the witness publications. And I just had that conversation recently with a family member, and you know, still won't go and do research outside of their publications.
Well, I remember they told you I did do the research.
Oh yeah, came back and said, oh yeah, I did the research. I said, well, where did you research? Did you go to the library? What did you do? No, Watchtower. I said, well, then you didn't do any research outside of the Watchtower publications like I asked you to. Well, why should I?
Yeah, and it's really, you know, because you have respect. You have a natural respect for your parents. I mean, they raised you, they cared for you, but being raised within this very restrictive fundamentalist religion, there's a certain amount of fear that always resides within you. It's a fear, and it's a respect for your parents' viewpoints. Yeah. But I feel that that's not reciprocated. It's just, you know, the like you guys have said, you know, you've been shunned, and that's not fair. It's just, you know, it should be a two-way street. And what, you know, why am I showing, you know, respect but not getting respect shown to me in return? And I know that every ex-witness, that's probably the hardest thing that any ex-witness will ever deal with, is feeling that their viewpoints and their beliefs are not validated. It's
completely dismissed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But yet you feel that you need to be careful with what you say. And, because I can't have a conversation with a family member who's still, in the organization without, Bible verses being thrown or something being said. And, I have my own feelings about the world around me, but I try to keep it neutral. I don't sit there and say, well, my belief this and my belief that, because I feel it's disrespectful. And I just wish that was shown to me. And I know that everyone watching this is probably that is the hardest part, and that takes a long time, because your feelings, what you value is as important as anybody else's. And it's hard because there's an arrogance there.
Absolutely.
There's an arrogance shown to you, and that it's absolute fact.
Yes, because they have the truth. And they're not willing to examine anything else other than what they've been given.
Yeah, and it's if somebody is saying to you that they have the absolute truth, how you can't argue that. No. And communication just absolutely, it breaks down. Where do you go from there?
Yeah, at that point there's no discussion. It's just a lecture about how I'm right, you're wrong. There's no possibility for an equal discussion about it.
And it's amazing to me, because really I would have avoided, when I was a witness, any kind of controversial topics with non-witness family members. Like I have my aunt, who's not a witness, very, very close to me, and now we can have debates about politics, about religion, talk about things that I never would have felt comfortable talking with. And by the way, we, on some topics, we completely disagree. And it can get a little worked up just a little bit, but at the end of the day, we kind of chuckle and say, well, you know what, you made some valid points, I still love you no matter what you believe. And, but you cannot get that from a witness. You just can't.
I had gotten to the point where me and my father agreed to disagree, which is kind of shocking to anybody.
Really?
That we agreed to disagree. I didn't really want to argue with him because I knew what I was up against, but he kind of gave up too. And it was just one of those things where we'll talk about everything else, but we won't talk about, religion.
And that's all I wanted from my family. That's all I wanted, is we can talk about anything else. There's a million other things that we can talk about. Why does it always have to come back to this?
Why does every single topic always come back to this?
That always goes back to that. And, but they weren't willing to do that. And, as a result, I felt like I don't have a real relationship with you anyways. So, not saying that I wanted to push them away, because I don't. I still would love it if they were in my life. But I want it on different terms. I want it on, let's have just a real relationship where we can love and respect each other. We don't have to talk about this. We can talk about anything else. So
I know moving, like me trying to move forward past, everything, I look at my own child and I'm constantly checking myself going, I would not want her to deal with this, or I wouldn't want her to deal with that, and try to keep her options open as far as the world goes, because my world was really closed. And it was quite I have to say, is when you use the word awakening, it is an awakening. as far as what I went through, it was an absolute awakening where I have a love affair with books and culture that it borderlines on the obscene. Because maybe it was a reaction to what I was not supposed to indulge in. I was supposed to be dealing with one narrow-minded idea, and once I freed the shackles, an awakening to me was going into Barnes & Noble and being able to walk over and go to the social sciences section and learn about things that I wasn't supposed to learn about. That was so freeing to me. I can understand why education was downplayed, because as soon as your mind starts opening, you start to embrace the world and everything, and you just want to just gobble it all up. But like I had posted on the website, is according to a Pew Research study, Jehovah's Witnesses are incredibly low on the totem pole when it actually comes to education. 63% of witnesses who were polled had high school diploma or less. And that was my biggest act of rebellion, was to forget it. I'm going to learn everything that I can, and I'm a better person for it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that anybody becomes a better person once they start really opening themselves up to looking at, everything that you talked about, looking into, the sciences, the social sciences, history. So, yeah.
We've all heard it said that knowledge is power. And that is really very, very, very true. The more knowledge you have about anything and everything, it's just going to benefit you in your life, Yeah.
Wow, this has been a great interview once again.
I have to ask the audience a question.
Okay.
I want Floyd to start his own channel. So I want everyone to post comments. I want everyone to start posting comments under this video. If you want Floyd to start his own channel, you tell him so. Because the dude is awesome, and I think he should. So help us out.
He's very, very, very smart. And he knows a lot of stuff.
Jeez. Talk about being put right on the spot. I'm sure my redness is being off, I think.
He's already doing so much, working on the website and researching new things for the website, learning new techniques, still taking classes and going to school to better himself for the job that he's doing now. So we're already seeing the benefits of what Floyd's been involved with. And maybe he won't make his own channel or something yet. Maybe he'll throw some videos up with us. But I just want to encourage him to keep going, because he's been a huge help for us. And it's so great to have him in our lives. And, just want to see it keep rocking.
Well, the thing that I have to say is that even if being a part of these guys, their project, which is really exciting, even if we could help one person, maybe my story resonated with somebody else. I mean, on a personal note, my girlfriend, we have a very deep connection to each other, because she just so happened to have grown up as a Jehovah's Witness herself, and she still has people involved in the religion, and we have a very deep-seated bond because of that. And the way I look at it is that if my story resonates with anybody, and like your disassociation letter, if it gives anyone a blueprint to try to unravel this chaos that you may find yourself in, because I read the comments, and some people's comments just touch my heart, because I was there. I know what it was like to be, I felt oppressed. And if I can help somebody with saying, okay, this is what I did, this is how I did it, and you know, it may not pertain to your life, but maybe one nugget, if it helps you, then hey, that was exactly what I wanted.
Yeah, that's how we feel too.
Yeah, I mean, when we were starting to first watch videos on YouTube, you may not agree with every single thing a person on a particular channel says, but you take a piece from this one and a piece from that one and a piece from that one, and you start building a complete idea of what you want. And, you know, everybody's story provides you with another option. This is what they did, this is what they did, this is what, you know, the more you know, the better off you are, you know, so I agree, yeah.
Well, that's why I like the fact that there's now a movement, there's now a community of people who, I mean, every day you guys are always saying about new channels propping up, trying to get me to do one, but you know, this is obviously growing, and the more, you know, this isn't about any one person, this is about something much bigger, and we all know what the bigger is. So I hope that, you know, Robin and Mike, they may get you to, you know, start your own channel, because exactly, start your own channel.
You know who you are.
Exactly.
I'm talking to you.
Yeah. So, you know, I hope that this lights a fire, and if I could have any small part in it, then that would make me feel good.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, we're going to say goodbye for now, and thank you again, Floyd.
Thanks for having me.
And so take a look at whatsupwatchtower.com. He's been hard at work on that.
And again, info@whatsupwatchtower.com. You can email us direct through there. Mm-hmm. There's links. There's also a new newsletter that is going to be propagating and getting that done.
Yep.
So you can sign up for the newsletter at the website. And
Follow
it'll go out
us
to
on
you.
Twitter.
Yep.
Yeah.
check out the Facebook page. We will. Don't be surprised if you visit one day and then go back and something new is there, because we're always working on something.
Yeah.
Always working on something.
All right. Thanks again,
All right.
and we will see you next time.
See you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.